Hello my dear friends, welcome to my channel. This is not only a story about saying no. It is a journey toward freedom and self-respect. It is a lesson for anyone who has ever been afraid to speak up. It is about rediscovering what truly matters. The word no is small. It has only 2 letters, but for me, it felt as heavy as a mountain. I used to believe that saying no was the same as disappointing people. If I said no, I thought I would lose friends, miss opportunities, or seem unkind. Growing up, I was taught to be helpful. My parents would say, "Be polite, say yes when people ask for help." Teachers praised me for volunteering. Friends liked me because I was always available. Over time, I became known as someone who would always agree. At first, it felt good to be liked, but as I got older, I noticed something strange. I was always tired. I had no time for myself. My own dreams were waiting at the bottom of a long list. And I kept saying, "I'll do them later." But later never came. There was always another task, another favor, another project. I started feeling like a balloon that was being filled with too much air, stretched and close to bursting. One day, a friend asked me to help with a big event. I wanted to say no. I had a huge deadline at work, and I was already behind, but I didn't want to let my friend down. The thought of saying no filled me with fear. Would they think I didn't care? Would they stop asking me to join them in the future? Would they think I was selfish? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the conversation I hadn't yet had. I imagined their disappointed face, their sharp words, the awkward silence. I felt guilty for even thinking of saying no, but deep inside, a small voice whispered, "You cannot keep living like this." That voice was right. I was living for everyone else. I had forgotten how to live for myself. It took days of thinking, worrying, and arguing with myself before I finally decided to say no. I didn't know how the other person would react, but I knew I couldn't keep saying yes to everything. Something had to change. This was the start of my journey, a journey that began with fear but ended with freedom. I didn't know it yet, but that small word would change my life in ways I never imagined. Saying no for the first time was not a simple decision. It was like standing at the edge of a high cliff, wondering if I should jump. The fear wasn't about the word itself. It was about what might happen after I said. I had always been the reliable one at work. I was the person who stayed late to finish tasks others couldn't handle among friends. I was the helper, the problem solver, the one who would say, "Sure, I can do that." People expected it from me, and I expected it from myself. But the problem was bigger than just being busy. Deep inside, I worried that people only liked me because I said yes. If I refused even once, would they stop seeing me as dependable? Would I lose their respect, or worse, their friendship? This thought kept me trapped. I often imagined a chain around my ankle, with the word obligation written on it. Every time someone asked for help, the chain grew heavier. Fear was bad enough, but guilt was worse. Even before I said no, I could feel the guilt growing inside me. Like a storm waiting to break, I asked myself endless questions. Am I being selfish? What if they really need me? What kind of friend or coworker would I be if I turned them down? These questions didn't have easy answers, and the guilt didn't wait for their conversation to happen. It appeared the moment I thought about refusing, in the days before my first no. I kept rehearsing excuses in my head. I'm sorry, I just don't have the time right now. I wish I could, but I really need to focus on my own work. Can we plan for another time? But each excuse felt weak. What if they argued back? What if they made me feel like I was overreacting? I imagined every possible reply and every possible reaction: anger, disappointment, confusion. At times, I almost convinced myself to say yes again, just to avoid the discomfort. But another thought pushed through. If I keep saying yes to everything, I will have nothing left for myself. The night before I finally said no, I sat at my desk, staring at my to-do list. It was a long list, longer than usual, and none of the tasks were truly mine. They were favors, extra projects, responsibilities that I had taken on because I didn't want to upset anyone. Felt like I was disappearing from my own life. I didn't have time to rest, to think, or to do the things I cared about. That realization scared me more than the idea of saying no, so I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would try. I would say no gently, but firmly, and no matter what happened, I would not apologize for taking care of myself. I didn't sleep much that night, but when the morning came, I felt a strange sense of strength, not confidence, just strength. Enough to speak one small word that I had been afraid of my whole life. I woke up nervous. My stomach felt tight, and my hands were cold. The conversation was going to happen today. I would finally say no when my friend called to ask if I could help with the event. I took a deep breath. My heart was beating so fast, I thought they might hear it through the phone. I'm really sorry, I said, but I can't help this time. I have a lot on my plate already, and I need to focus on finishing my own work. There was silence for 2 long seconds. I regretted everything. I wanted to take it back, to say, forget what I said. I'll do it. But then my friend simply replied, oh, okay, I understand. That was it. No anger, no disappointment, just understanding. I had been expecting a storm, but all I got was a light breeze. The moment I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: relief. It was as if someone had lifted a heavy bag off my shoulders. I realized that most of my fear and guilt had been based on imagination. I had been preparing for the worst, but the worst never came. The rest of the day felt different. I had extra time to focus on my own work, and for once, I didn't feel rushed. Even more surprising, I had mental space, room to think, plan, and even rest. I kept waiting for the guilt to return, but it didn't. Instead, I felt proud that I had finally stood up for myself, proud that I had been honest instead of agreeing out of fear. That evening, I sat with a cup of tea and thought about what had happened. I realized that saying no didn't close doors. It opened them doors to self-respect, balance, and peace of mind. I wondered why I had waited so long to try it. The first no went better than I imagined. But life didn't stay that simple. Soon, I had to say it again, this time to someone who didn't take it so well at work. A colleague asked me to cover their shift. I had already been working long hours and needed the evening to rest. I remembered the relief from my first no and decided to try again. I'm sorry, I said. I can't take your shift tonight. I really need some time to recover. This time, there was no polite reply. Instead, my colleague frowned. Seriously? You always help. What's going on with you? The words stung. They made me question myself. Was I being selfish? Was I letting people down after all? I wanted to take it back, to avoid the awkwardness, but deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. I had to remind myself that my needs mattered. So I stayed calm and replied, "I wish I could help, but I really can't this time. I hope you understand." The conversation ended awkwardly, and I felt uneasy for the rest of the day. But later, I noticed something. My colleague didn't stay upset for long. They found another solution and moved on sometimes. People assumed my no meant I didn't care. One friend even asked, "Are we not as close as we used to be?" That question hurt, but it gave me a chance to explain. It's not that. I said, "I value our friendship a lot. I just need to take better care of myself so I can be fully present when we do spend time together." Once I explained, they understood and even respected my honesty. I began to see that saying no wasn't just about refusing something. It was about learning to communicate clearly and kindly. It wasn't about closing doors. It was about setting boundaries that protected both my time and my relationships. Saying no once had felt terrifying. Saying it again had felt awkward. But after a few more tries, something unexpected began to happen, a ripple effect that changed how I saw my life. For the first time in years, I started asking myself, do I really want to do this? Does it align with my goals? These questions helped me decide what deserved a yes and what needed a no. My days no longer felt packed with random tasks. Instead, they felt meaningful. Each time I said no, I felt a little stronger, not louder, not ruder, just stronger inside. I learned to trust my judgment. I realized that people respected me more when I was honest about what I could and couldn't do. To my surprise, my relationships improved. Friends and colleagues began to see me as someone who had boundaries, and they respected that. Some even started saying no themselves, inspired by my example. Most importantly, saying no gave me time back, time to work on projects I had been postponing, time to rest, and time to simply enjoy life without feeling rushed. The word no, which once felt heavy, had become a key that unlocked clarity, confidence, and freedom. Saying no once felt impossible. Fear and guilt held me back. But I learned that those feelings were only shadows, illusions that faded once I spoke the word. I discovered that no is not selfish. It is a way to protect time, energy, and peace of mind. Through this journey, I found clarity in my priorities, strength in my choices, and honesty in my relationships. Saying no opened doors I didn't know existed, doors to a life where I am not just surviving, but living fully, and that is a lesson I will carry with me always.